But it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
That damsel in distress trope. Feminists hate it, except when they don't.
Watch out, you'll get us all killed!
HBR Talk with Hannah Wallen. Feminist commentator Anita Sarkeesian has made a living complaining about damsel in distress tropes in today's heroic fantasy stories, particularly in video games, but also in other entertainment media. Her grievances have become the battle cry of the social justice, or NPC, invasion of the culture of nerdy geeky pursuits and entertainment. Those whose activities built that culture are told we're nerding and geeking wrong now. Despite many of us being female, we're all apparently anti-woman. As we've described before, her main approach relies on twisting men's hero stories into warped exploitation narratives wherein the story itself doesn't matter, nor does the value of esteem for heroism in the main character. No, the writer's true intent was to victimize the story's female supporting characters. We're supposed to believe it's misogynistic to flesh out the description of good characters by detailing their dedication to their closest loved ones. At least, if the hero is male and any of those loved ones are female supporting characters without active roles in the story. This is both highlighted and compounded by Sarkeesian's feminist narrative on portrayal of benevolent masculinity in those relationships, especially when that's contrasted against manifestations of scum and villainy as antagonists strike out at heroes' hearts and souls by attacking their loved ones. Somehow the full dastardly nature of evildoers cannot be an aspect of their enmity toward the hero if the hero loves any woman. Certainly not if, as part of his backstory, she is his world. Why? Because, according to feminist logic, the point of celebrating heroic opposition to depravity and malice isn't to laud benevolent masculinity or condemn brutality. The argument seems to be that when stories include female victim narratives, critical depictions of malicious conduct and sympathetic representation of its impact on victims and their loved ones normalizes that conduct. When that convoluted gripe is not taking center stage, it's replaced with the complaint that representations of heroic responses to female vulnerability promote a dismissal of women's capacity for strength and power, as if in order to be strong and powerful, a person must also be invulnerable. You're apparently a misogynist now if you write stories in which the hero's wife or daughter isn't a Mary Sue. There's a lot to criticize in Sarkeesian's application of feminist logic to damsel tropes in entertainment media, and it's all been covered extensively. But what we're interested in for this episode is the conflict between that and feminism's own damsel tropes. Remember, according to these criticisms, portrayal of women as victims normalizes victimizing women, even when that portrayal is sympathetic to the victim and involves condemnation of the culprit. At the same time, it demeans women as inferior, implying weakness, ineptitude, and incompetence. The damsel trope infantilizes women by ignoring their agency and implying that they must rely on men to protect them, or to avenge them should another man do them serious harm. It's insulting, intimidating, and holds women back, right? And the portrayal of men as heroes supposedly increases that by treating strength, power, and moral outrage over abuse as gendered traits, inherently masculine. This supposedly teaches girls that they cannot exhibit these traits because of their sex, again, holding them back from achieving the greatness such characteristics can promote. So why is it that feminism's public rhetoric on gender issues relies so heavily on these same tropes? Every narrative the movement uses treats women as victims, often of their own choices, and portrays men, or aspects of masculinity, as both perpetrator and the obligatory hero. Think about patriarchy theory, a supposed system of social structures and practices in which men dominate, oppress, and exploit women. This system is said to have existed pretty much throughout civilized history, replacing egalitarian Stone Age civilizations for, according to feminist scholar Gerda Lerner, no apparent reason. Wikipedia's Wiki Project Feminism writers, citing American anthropologist Marvin Harris, blame the concept of fatherhood. Remember, folks, feminism is not about hating men, and feminists don't have daddy issues. Whatever the reason, according to feminists, since the inception of the patriarchy of feminist imagining, the male half of the population has basically used a combination of physical violence and emotional abuse to subjugate the female half of the population against their will. In the patriarchy of feminist imagining, men have successful careers that bring them prestige, wealth, and power. Women have babies. The narrative is basically that women would achieve all the same successes, if only it weren't for that darn violent and abusive patriarchy keeping them down. How does that not contradict the feminist notion that women's capabilities are exactly the same as those of men in everything? Certainly we cannot be expected to believe that one population so brutally dominated another entirely equal population with identical interests, aptitudes, and predispositions into a subordinate, dependent role that would forgo those successes totally against that subordinate population's will. That would be irrational. So how could such a system exist? There are three logical possibilities. One is female complicity. The totally equal in all ways population of women went along with the social changes that led to such a system, perhaps because that exempted them from the degree and scope of risk-taking and responsibility men had to live up to fill the role into which it placed them. Or perhaps more specifically, because it would change a woman's role in tribal wars. Under an egalitarian system, there would be no reason for women to be exempt from the expectation that they enter combat alongside the men of their tribe to defend their land and their homes against invading forces. The rationale for a male frontline, female second line of defense hierarchy would open the door to structuring other aspects of society that way. However, I have not seen feminists consider this possibility. Another possibility is actual gender asymmetry. Naturally evolving differences between male and female humans led to the evolution of differing gender roles, with the concept of fatherhood developing as a result of that evolution, combined with increases in our ancestors' understanding of basic biology. Rather than male humans subjugating their female counterparts, the sexes formed cooperative habits adopted by the majority of the population in response to changes in their environment as human civilization emerged and grew, with outliers to this development actually just being holdovers from the previous egalitarian norm. That idea isn't far off of what's been postulated by neo-traditionalist conservatives. The third possibility is a combination of the first two. As human understanding of math and science led to more modern construction of structures, more advanced medicine and technology, and more dangerous weaponry, our ancestors both naturally and consciously gravitated toward a system of gender roles that would preserve the communities they had formed and ensure the welfare of their children. If anything, this would be the most likely way the system feminists call patriarchy would have formed. However, it still wouldn't be a system of male over female domination, but one of coordination and cooperation. Instead, feminists appear to have adopted the belief that there is only one natural difference between men and women. They view despotism as a masculine trait against which otherwise totally equal women have no apparent defense. That seems to be the underlying premise of the victim narrative that is patriarchy theory. And most grassroots feminists who blame patriarchy for everything bad in the world don't even realize they're operating on that assumption. They cannot articulate it. They cannot explain the theory without it. They just have this free-floating sense of victimhood without any solid understanding of why. Therefore, when asked to prove the concept is valid and concrete, all they can do is argue in circles. They cite adversity women face and limiting female gender roles as evidence that women are oppressed, and women's supposed oppression as evidence of patriarchy. When adversity men face and limiting male gender roles are brought to their attention, they compartmentalize. The excuse completes the circle.
It's different when women face adversity and limiting gender roles because those are imposed on women under an oppressive, patriarchal system.
They do this without ever realizing they have just completed a circle to cite patriarchy as evidence of itself. Many complaints feminists make about hero and damsel tropes and stories are true about patriarchy theory. It is demeaning to both sexes, demonizes men, and infantilizes women. If a video game were created with such a system cited as the hero's motivation for his actions, a never-ending quest to rescue his girlfriend from an evil, domineering enemy that was basically patriarchy by some other name, feminists like Sarkeesian would blow their stacks. Cries of misogyny, anti-woman rhetoric, and normalizing subjugation of women would be leveled at the game's creators, along with demands that the whole thing be scrapped. How dare anyone tell such a story? And yet, feminists have no problem doing it all the time. The wage gap narrative is probably the most blatant, overtly presuming women victim of their own choices. In regard to the supposed gap, it has been unequivocally proved that, as stated in the CONSAD report, the differences in the compensation of men and women are the result of a multitude of factors, and the raw wage gap should not be used as the basis to justify corrective action. Indeed, there may be nothing to correct. The differences in raw wages may be almost entirely the result of the individual choices made by both male and female workers. Feminists have responded to this by claiming women's choices are imposed on them by patriarchy, and essentially arguing that their employers owe them a salary for everything they do at home for the benefit of their own families. Working women, feminists insist, are victims of the combination of their own decisions to fill these roles, men's decisions to not fill these roles, and employers' decisions to compensate workers based on their contributions to the workplace, rather than the overall value their life choices bring to society in general. In other words, feminists don't understand economics. Apply the Sarkeesian standard to the feminist outlook on heterosexual relationships, and you get the same thing. On the surface, yes means yes sounds like a great way of preventing conflict and suffering, until you think about the fact that it's based on gendering concepts like agency and accountability. As we've discussed before, feminists butcher the concept of boundaries. They ignore women's agency when boundary identification, establishment, communication, and enforcement are under consideration. They ignore men's autonomy when their boundaries are in conflict with a woman's interests. They treat any discussion that attributes to women any agency and responsibility regarding their own boundaries as evidence of a rape culture, and any discussion that holds women accountable when they violate men's boundaries as a tu quo qui attack on female victim narratives.
You can't say men are equally victimized by female-perpetrated sexual assault. That's just an attack on women who have been raped. It's not the same because women are harmless. You're just trying to make rape of women sound harmless.
Once again, this outlook demeans both sexes, demonizing and dehumanizing men and infantilizing women. Talk about bidirectional partner violence, and feminists fall back on the same circular reasoning they use to support patriarchy theory.
It's not the same. Men hit women to exercise power and control, but women who hit men are anticipating or responding to men's bad behavior.
And that's totally not about power and control. Object to inequalities in the area of reproductive rights, parental rights, and parental responsibility, and you'll receive a barrage of arguments that boil down to labeling any expectation of equal female agency and accountability misogyny, while excusing discrimination against fathers as a symptom of patriarchy. Women are literally victims of their own choices, and by some convoluted logic, men are to blame. This thread continues throughout feminism's response to everything. Each issue that gets discussed is put through the filter of patriarchy theory's original victim narrative, coloring the feminist outlook to match. How did Anita put it?
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
There you have it. The whole world is a feminist damsel trope. There is no escape, no relief. Women are victims of everything. You can't get much more in need of a rescue than that. And who, in this world of male oppressors and female victims, is the hero feminists would call upon for that?
Men. I want men to take up this mantle.
Is anybody surprised? When my friend Roger's ex-wife stabbed his niece's dog, family court finally issued a restraining order against her, but police refused to enforce it. Roger's ex-wife filed blatantly false charges, got caught lying to police, perjured herself, and even stalked him and his witnesses, all while a biased court turned a blind eye. It took myself and a whole team of his other friends working together around the clock to protect him from further false accusations and to put a stop to her abuse. Roger wasn't the first male friend I'd had who experienced a court system slanted against men. Jason was convicted of assault strictly because his ex said she was scared of him. Mark because a judge thought stopping a woman from stabbing him in the throat was abusive. Steve spent a weekend in jail for non-payment of child support because of a caseworker's typo. My friend Roger wasn't a wake-up call for me. He was the last straw. Witnessing false accusations against friends in multiple jurisdictions in multiple counties made it obvious that this was an area of systematic institutionalized discrimination against men, one that blindsides them all too often, with life-wrecking force. I learned the importance of documentation, of seeing through and exposing false framing and other forms of deceit, and countering victim narratives used to disguise glaring fabrications as legitimate complaints. I sought out men's rights forums to share the tools I had seen work against false accusations, and soon realized that the false accusations I witnessed are a symptom of a larger, broader pattern of lies. Men stand wrongly accused of the ill-defined crimes of patriarchy, of privilege, and of toxicity. Spurious, distorted narratives created in women's name are used to push for a corrupt system that, intentionally or not, helps liars destroy men by stripping all men of a presumption of innocence. I want to provide you, our listeners, with the tools to fight back against those distorted narratives and the abuses they are used to support. I want to arm men against the lies used to dehumanize and demonize them. Most of all, I want men to be able to assert their own truth without fear that it will be buried under the rubble of society-wide false accusations. Ask yourself if that's something you'd like to see more of. Ask yourself if you'd like to support my efforts in arming fighters. And if your answer is yes, please go to www.feedthebadger.com. Thank you. Hello and welcome to not quite technical difficulties with the Badgers, but something like it. Or rather, HBR Talk 56, Tropes versus Narratives, Feminism's Duplicity. I'm not sure exactly what has happened. I hope that Anna will be along soon. I'm pretty sure that it has to do with the change in showtime, and maybe I'm not the best communicator. So that's probably my fault. But I also know crap happened with Discord, so I'm not gonna necessarily assume that 100% until I know all the facts. And with that, I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with that adorable specter of death, Prim Reaper, and hopefully soon, the lovely and intelligent Anna Cherry, to unravel the mental gymnastics of an aspect of feminist hypocrisy. But before we do that, more shilling! Because you guys haven't heard enough shilling already. If you're on YouTube and it starts experiencing platform malfunction syndrome and won't let you listen, or if the feminist mafia has broken one of our legs, well, we're also on Twitch and Facebook. Hopefully Facebook did start. If we're 10 minutes or more late, it won't. But you can't keep a good badger down anyway. And if you want to catch our show in its audio format, or if you want to be sure you'll always be able to catch our live streams, even though YouTube hates us and always has at least one of our channels in the gulag, remember to go to badgerfeed.com and register to receive notifications. And remember, with all those non-shadow bans, all those non-shadow bans, sorry, allergies and I can't pronounce words, you need notifications from badgerfeed.com if you want to know what's going on. And if you're still listening to our live streams on the main Honey Badger radio channel, please, that's old news. For live streams, the live stream channel is where it's at. So go to Badger Live Streams, subscribe, like, make sure you're a part of the live conversation. If you try to super chat us right now in the old channel, you can't, because that one's in the gulag. So there's not a link in the low bar this time around, because I did it the last couple shows. But come on over to Honey Badger live streams and join the conversation. Last but not least, like and share, please. This is really important. It's the only way to thumb your nose at the establishment that tries to shut us down and actually get us out there into the public so people can see and hear what we have to say. Because otherwise we're going to be, silenced one way or another.
Don't listen to men's rights activists if you want to know what they have to say.
Hello, Anna. Did I screw up and not make the time clear? Because I looked at what I sent you and I'm like, I didn't really emphasize that. I just put that down in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah, I must have missed it. I'm so used to the 5 o'clock start time that I just kind of didn't even think about it. My bad.
So it is my fault. I didn't do it right. This is part of why I think I might be a little autistic, even though I don't have a diagnosis, because I do stuff like this all the time, and then later on I'm like, wait, how come people don't understand what I was talking about?
Welcome to my story of my life. I'm also, the language barrier sometimes is an issue. I look back and I'm like, wow, how did anyone not stop me and go, what the fuck are you talking about? We have no idea what you're saying.
Oh,
please do me that favor.
English is my first language and I have that language barrier, so that's pretty bad. In fact, English is my only language because I didn't apply myself to learning another language, which is, again, whose fault? It's the patriarchy. Yeah. The patriarchy made me not learn other languages. I don't know. I linked you to the text of the opening monologue. Obviously, catching up with the text of the opening monologue is kind of, whoa! I don't know if you guys can hear that, but my whole apartment is shaking.
No, I definitely can't hear that.
It wasn't even an earthquake. That was my neighbor's radio in his car.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ.
My gosh.
I'm sorry if I...
Just blasting HBR. There we go.
It sounded like Close Encounters of the Third Kind outside my apartment. Somebody's going to go deaf. Sorry about that, guys. That was a hell of an interruption, but that just scared the ever-loving shit out of me.
Wow.
But yeah, so in any case, so there's the, oh my God, people heard that. Somebody said they heard it. That's horrible. That was a hell of a thing to hear in the live streams. And I apologize if people are saying they hear my nose whistling. I have allergies so bad, you guys have no idea. That was bass. That was, somebody had it was all about that bass, like so all about that bass that they were willing to sacrifice their ears to it. Jeez. Hopefully no feedback though. So, all right, but back to the whole victim narrative thing. So the thing that made me want to talk about this was I've been watching recent news, okay, and I do that all the time, even though it's probably really unhealthy. I watch, different commentators. I watch what I can stand, a few minutes here and a few minutes there of various people talking online about, the Kavanaugh hearings and the female voting bloc and so on. And then, of course, I get into a lot of Twitter conversations. And the consensus seems to be that all women everywhere are victims of men not white knighting for Dr. Ford over the accusation against Brett Kavanaugh and just denying his due process rights altogether.
What are they talking about? Because I follow, quite a few liberal and, in fact, neo-progressive people. And so in my experience, I've seen a floodgate of support against Kavanaugh to the point where people like Amanda Palmer and other musicians were holding free benefit concerts to stand with Blasey Ford and to be against Kavanaugh. And I've even seen footage of, in fact, men of color mostly, interviews and them standing in a Red Rover sort of formation in front of either the White House or some other capital city building where they were protesting and against Kavanaugh. And the interview of one of the men, they were specifically saying that it's up to men to, what did he say? He said it's to stand not just with women, but for women. and then that was one of the interviews that was highlighted. So I'm not sure what they're paying attention to if they're saying that the situation's reversed, because I've seen nothing but support from men, specifically groundswell of support from men who virtue signal and stand out there and then present their stance on this issue, that they're with Blasey Ford. And I call it virtue signaling because in this particular situation, they could have picked a better hill to die on. It is a completely he said, she said, 35 years ago muddled. Like, there are so many recent controversies that are way more accurately describe the status of women as victims of male violence and aggression than the Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford. But the fact that he is a Supreme Court justice and that he has an anti-abortion narrative and some of the more conservative narratives that a lot of liberal Democrats don't stand for, I think that's where that conflation is coming from, where they're using her status as a woman victim and their voicing of support for her as also a way to oppose a conservative nominee. And I think those are very, very different, and they need to be separated, because right now we have complete muddying of the water, I think. But back to the original point, I don't know what they're talking about. All I'm seeing is support of Blasey Ford and stance against Kavanaugh. The support is pro-woman, so I'm not sure.
As far from what I can see, it looks to me like they're only talking about the men in Congress. And the dumb thing, the senators that stood for due process in this instance were not all men. So the dumb thing is they're talking about men like men are at fault, and like this was a bad thing. But there were women, and then of course we talked about the whole gender traitor thing, and Connors being labeled a gender traitor for, quote, standing with the men. And that's the situation here. So we get told, like, we spent, 3 years getting told by anti-Gamergaters and anti-comic skaters and anti-sad puppy narratives that damsel tropes, damsel in distress tropes and stories are completely unrealistic, that it's infantilizing to women and demeaning to women to focus on female victimhood and expect men to come in and save the day. But what did they do in this situation? They ignored, like, there were legitimate questions. Kavanaugh was not a perfect candidate for this situation. Like I said before, he was a Bush guy. I wasn't really all that happy with him. And then instead of talking about the question of these rulings from his past or these things that he has said, instead of focusing on those things, what did they do?
Or the fact that he specifically lied about the word boof and devil's, triangle and things like that. He lied about what those were. I don't
buy that. The reason I don't buy that is because I grew up in the U.S. in the 70s and 80s, before there was an internet to spread around all over the United States the same meaning for the same slang term everywhere. And I in my experience, slang terms for things can be dramatically different between even small groups of friends. So I don't buy that
that's possible. The pre-internet thing definitely changes things. I kind of go by the people who are of the same age and things that they talk about being common terms. And so, if somebody did, and somebody has come out and said that, we all knew what those terms meant back in the day, and it's like, all right, well, that's a counter argument, but it was pre-internet, so
my thing on this is, because it was pre-internet, those meanings are not necessarily set everywhere. And what I noticed, what I could tell you is, if it made television, like, Valley Girl spread specific meanings for specific terms around. Valley Girl was, you ended up with a bunch of gals imitating that, like, really. And then the same thing happened with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Everybody started
the surfer bro.
Right. So those things spread, but my family would travel a little bit here and there for vacation and stuff. So we went to Florida and we went to the Carolinas and stuff like that. And I would find that things that we said in Ohio didn't compute exactly the same to people in other locations. So this was, it's entirely possible that he was 100% telling the truth there. So I unless somebody can come out and show concrete proof that those terms were used by everyone everywhere the same way, I'm not buying it. And as far as from my perspective, I knew Devil's Triangle as a drinking game, and I knew when you were trying to talk about two guys and a gal together, that was not called a Devil's Triangle. That was called an Eiffel Tower. So there were differences in terminology.
Devil's threesome now, but yeah, sorry, Prim, you've been trying to say something for a while.
So yeah, well,
I mean, it's just kind of, even putting aside the politics of all of it, like I don't even care about whether this guy is right or left, or whether the person accusing him is right or left. There's this whole question of why all of these people are all of a sudden coming out now to, you know, blame various different gentlemen for assaults that happened many, many, many years ago, where the proof is long gone. And it's just kind of like, people will argue, okay, well, you know, it's just that the public view of sexual assault now is just allowing these women to be able to come forward finally, and they're very courageous for doing so. And it's like, but that's not really it. They're gonna make you feel guilty for, you know, having the audacity to question whether or not, like, we should proceed with this kind of thing, because there's no proof anymore. So it's like, we can't proceed. We have to operate under the presumption of innocence. We have to, like, it is a cornerstone of our legal system that we have to do this. So that being said, we can't go off these 30-year-old accusations and just blame guys for everything. But, you know, they're going to say that if you are unwilling to do that, if you are unwilling to stand with this woman's accusation and blame Kavanaugh for everything, or whoever the flavor of the week is being accused, they're going to say that you're a misogynist, when that's really not at all what it's about. And it just drives me nuts, because it's not necessarily a political issue. I would say the same if it was a liberal guy getting accused 30 years after the fact. Yeah, and it just really bothers me.
Well, it turns female victim status into a political weapon.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. It's very, very clear from everything we've seen now, especially with the fourth wave of feminism, as it keeps progressing. It is increasingly obvious to a 5-year-old that it is not about equality. It is not about leveling the playing field in ways. It's not about these lofty platitudes that are being espoused. It is very clearly about a power ploy. And I'd be fine with that. Just tell the truth, feminists. Say that you want women to be on the forefront and you want men to be subservient. It is feminism. You want women on top as the new patriarchy, as the matriarchy, replacing this patriarchy. You want men second place, you want men on the bottom, and you want yourself on top. You want to be able to dictate how men should behave and react, and them obey. That is what feminism wants, period. It is not about equality. It is not about giving, in any way, standing up to a particular consistent set of beliefs. That is really where it breaks down. There's no consistency, because then women would be all for the draft for women. Feminists would be all for increasing the entry and the gatekeeping from mining jobs and from underwater welding jobs. How many underwater welders that are boys are in special vocational schools right now? Every single one of them. 90 to 100% of them are men. Where's the equality there? Why aren't they talking about the gatekeeping of the dirty, grimy, difficult, dangerous jobs, but instead are talking about gatekeeping of CEOs and cushy STEM desk jobs? That's, once again, lack of consistency. So feminists just need to come out and admit the fact that they want women to be the ruling class, and women that believe in a particular idea especially. And if you do not agree with the papacy, with the dogma, then you need to be second class. And that's what they want. And it's very clear. And I would just have so much more respect for feminists if they came out and admitted that, instead of sticking to outdated, blatantly false platitudes.
Speaking of dirty jobs, just real quick, because you mentioned a couple. I just posted a story on Twitter, I think yesterday. This really grossed me out. But there was a story out of one of the states, and I can't remember which one, where 3 men, ended up having to go to the bottom of an 80-foot sewage tank through raw sewage and dig around with their bare hands to retrieve something that is primarily used by women, flushable wipes. And,
oh dear.
Yeah, like for the record, anybody listening, just because it says it's flushable doesn't mean it is. If it's not toilet paper or bodily waste, it's not flushable, no matter what it says on the package. But those guys had to go down there and spend hours swimming around in literal shit to get that stuff out of the tank so that it would run, it would work properly, and the sewage could be treated. And that's a job you will not find women doing. I guarantee there's no women. There's not a single woman doing that job.
Right. And another thing that bothers me too is that you know, they'll use this kind of discussion to say, oh, you guys are only saying this because you hate women. You just don't want to believe women. And it's like, no, it's not even that. Like, okay, let's just say that...
Right, that's when it becomes a weapon. Sorry, I didn't mean to... I kind of went off on a tangent. I didn't mean to didn't finish my earlier point that I meant to finish, which is it's obviously a power ploy, because anytime you criticize them, they say it's because you hate women. And anytime you bring up a legitimate point, they're like, oh, you hate women. So it's clearly a ploy and a weapon. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh, exactly. And it drives me nuts because, like, you'll bring up a legitimate thing, like the presumption of innocence, and it's like, okay, so how would you feel if this happened to your beloved husband or father, if you don't have one of those, like, you know, somebody that you care about? It's not about hating women or anything like that. Like I was saying before, let's just say, for instance, this person legitimately did have something happen to them 30 years ago, and they were legitimately just too scared to come forward until just now. So let's just presume for 1 second that that's what really happened. I feel bad in that case for that person, that they went through that thing and they didn't have the courage to come up until now. But unfortunately, it's too late. Like, that's just the way it is, because we cannot go off of just word alone, because there are too many people who will abuse that if we have that kind of, like, if we go forward with that logic. Like, there are people who will use it against others for very much not good reasons, right? Like, what if somebody came along the next day and just said, okay, well, then Ms. Ford did something terrible to me 20 years ago, and what, you have to believe me because we're just going off of what everybody says, right? So if that's the way we're going, then we can just reach out and grab each other in a big circle and just run around until everybody has accused everybody, and then that's going to be the end of it.
Well, that's the other end.
Go off of it, right?
It's the other end of it. They do not accept at all when the accuser is naming a woman as the perpetrator. And this is something that, like, there's a division among feminists on this, where some feminists will actually, say, oh no, we've got to have even-handed standards on this. We can't say that, if we're going to believe victims, that we only believe women who say they're victims and we don't believe men who say they're victims. But then the feminists that actually get shit done, the ones that are lobbying Congress, the ones that are writing articles for major publications, the ones that people listen to, they have a totally different outlook on it. And their victim narrative seems to include the idea that it's different when a woman does it, and it's different when it happens to a man. And they use that whole patriarchy circular reasoning. Well, patriarchy exists because of adversity that women face. And even though men face the same adversity, it's different because women are facing it under a patriarchy. Totally circular reasoning. So we end up seeing that female victimhood ends up becoming a political weapon, a social weapon. And the political weapon isn't even one-sided. Like, if you go back to the 90s, then I remember this very starkly, because at that time I was a very, very staunch conservative-only Republican, newly registered in the early 90s, and everything. And the victim narrative bothered me even then, in terms of some of the people that were labeled victims. Sorry about that whistle. That was my teeth. But in any case, well, you know, it's a part of the allergy issue, but I'm not going to get into that. The whole thing of Monica Lewinsky being a victim. If I remember right, when that happened, I was just about the same age as she was. And I'm sitting here looking at this girl who is an adult. And I'm thinking, you know, if I used to go out with my friends, you know, I was single. I used to go, we'd go to local, we didn't have clubs like you have in the city, in bigger cities. We had clubs like you have in small towns. They were sort of like a cross between a bar and, I don't know, like a social club. They weren't really hopping the way you find in a bigger city. But we'd go and we'd have, you know, I always drank pop because I was always driving, and we'd dance and, you know, we'd meet people and chit-chat and stuff like that. And if I'd have gone in there and gotten drunk and started fights and drove drunk home and got pulled over and busted for it and everything, I would have been, every aspect of that, I would have been held accountable as an adult. The only time I wouldn't have been is if I'd have started a fight with a dude. And I really didn't think about that at the time because I wasn't as aware of these issues then as I am now. But here we had this woman, right? Monica Lewinsky was treated like a victim of her affair with the President of the United States at that time. Like, she was treated as a victim of her choice to, I don't remember how she worded it, but she specifically told people she was going to bag the president when she got to the White House. That was like her goal, and she was a victim of it because he was a man and he was older than she was. He was in a powerful position, which is what she was seeking out. And we have the same thing now with Stormy Daniels, who when Trump hits back at her, it's kind of hilarious to me. But Stormy Daniels had that same thing. She was working with a wealthy man who was powerful in several areas of business. And, you know, she says there was an affair. He says there wasn't. If there was, this may be another instance of a, you know, woman bagging a powerful guy. And at the same time, what did she do at the end of it? She blackmailed him. Pay me money or I am going to tell everybody about our affair. And she's what? A victim.
Well, see, the victim thing is because I'm on the inside of this thing. And so looking at it from my perspective, the victimhood comes where everyone and their mother and their grandmother is coming after Stormy and calling her a whore, and then in the internet or web, sorry, not web, but TV, the opposite, exact opposite. The mainstream media, the TV presentations, they are denigrating her as a person and saying she has no moral character because she is a prostitute, or not even that, but a porn star. So my issue, and that's where the victimhood comes from, the looking down on her as a person and because of her job, when there's way more demeaning jobs than that, and a job has
they don't have any business doing that. You know,
the flaw in her character. Yeah, the flaw in her character is the blackmail. Let's talk about things and call out things for what they are. 100%. She is getting her name out in the news, getting popularity, blackmailing a wealthy blowhard idiot, in my opinion, and causing a situation which maybe not the best, but you know what? She's within her right in the capitalist system to exploit everything she has in her power, including blackmail, including the legal system, including absolutely anything that isn't strictly, provably illegal as ruled by the court of law.
Well, because blackmail is illegal.
That's the system we've set up. Sorry, that is the moral system of the capitalist environment. Unless it is proven illegal, you're within your rights to do whatever you want. All right, so she is within her rights to do whatever the fuck. I personally disagree with it. I think it's shitty, but at least she did not lie about the fact that it wasn't a fair. And I will say, as an insider, will let you know, not for her personally, I mean for the industry. If you read that one article where she talks about as she was having sex with him, she goes, "I wonder how much he'll pay me. I don't know, if he did, it'd probably be a lot." That was her way of saying that she didn't just have sex with Donald Trump for no reason. Okay, that is her way of saying that she was paid to have sex with him. It wasn't if he paid me, I bet it would be a lot. It was, oh, by the way, I'm not just fucking a gross dude. I got paid to fuck him, which is, in my opinion, better. But, you know, whatever. People may disagree with that.
Honestly, blackmail is illegal. If you can prove that that somebody blackmailed,
right. It has to be proven in a court of law.
But as far as, you know, prostitution shouldn't be illegal. And I have no problem, like, if she had come along and said, yes, I'll do this for money, up front, telling him up front, yeah, I want money, but I'll do this with you. That's their decision, right? That's between them. That's not anybody else's business.
Yeah, just as kind of a social side note, since we're talking about upfront and say I'll do this for money, if prostitution was legal, it would be a lot easier to do that. But this kind of harkens back to the conversation of consent and of saying things up front. That is sadly, in my experience as well with men, that is not how things work, unfortunately. A lot of times when you have like directors and producers and photographers and other people that you want to impress or in other ways network with and get jobs through them, you can't just go at them and be like, because I know a lot of traveling models that basically they're, you know, escort girls and prostitutes essentially, but they call themselves a traveling model, and it's all very, very innuendo, and it's like, well, I'll just come and just shoot and like you pay me money and who knows what will happen. And guys like that. I've met a lot of men, especially in powerful positions, where they don't want to admit or to feel like they're paying for sex, because that's gross in the environment that we live in right now, and the social stigma that we have around it. People feel gross because they're made to feel pathetic when paying for sex, even though we pay for absolutely everything we need, everything, food, light, even love. We have to like pay to get things in this current system. So, but they feel gross about it. And so the way to go around that as a performer, as a female, if you know what you're about, if you're good at it, if you're not autistic, you go at it as a very veiled, very like, oh, let's just hang out. I don't know. I'll sleep with you, maybe. Like, it's very made to seem like they're there for them as a person. Of course, the money is required, but the narrative that they present would not make it easy for a woman to say, hey, give me money and be upfront about it. I know I have that problem. I'm way too upfront about things.
I'd actually put it this way. If you go to see a comedian, you're paying someone to make you laugh, to tell you jokes and make you laugh. Now, when I hang out with my friends, I do that, and my friends do that. We all do that for each other as part of our friendship. We do it without expecting anything in return. There's no, you know, you bring me food, I will tell you jokes, you know, none of that. You guys hear me spouting puns left and right, and stuff like that. You know, that's just my normal thing. But there are people who get paid to do it, and part of the reason they get paid to do it is because they're better at it than everybody else. They're experts at it, or they have become particularly popular for their style of it. And they have no problem. Like, you would not see me get up on a stage every week in a different location with a whole bunch of people looking at me and be able to do what I do here on the show. By the end of my first year, I would probably die of a stress-related illness, and that's just the way it is for me. But there are people who are able to establish and navigate their boundaries properly, that are very good at interacting with other people socially, and very good at interacting with other people in a intimate setting without maybe suffering some of the same drawbacks that you have if you're not prepared to do that, and you don't have the constitution, the emotional and psychological constitution for it. And there is no reason they should not be able to make money at that the same way that somebody gets up on a stage and sings for people, or tells jokes for people, or gives speeches about important things for people, or whatever. It's all, there's a lot of ways we pay for social interaction. And that's not to take this one thing that is difficult for a lot of people to wrap their minds around and say, well, that's shameful and demeaning and ugly and sinful and everything. It doesn't make sense to me, and I think it's stupid. I can understand denigrating disloyalty I can understand denigrating, using it as a victim narrative. I can understand denigrating, things like that, where you're actually not being upfront and honest and forthright about it. But, and I would denigrate telling someone afterwards, I'm going to shame you for paying me for this, or for interacting with me this way, if you don't give me money. I'm blackmailing people about it, that kind of thing. Just, that's a totally different story. But if you look at this, the point that I was making with bringing up Stormy Daniels and bringing up Monica Lewinsky and all that is this thread of the female victim narrative and women as victim of their own choices, and even this runs through all of politics. And if we don't do something to stop it as a movement, if we continue to tolerate this, like, we can't say, well, their side is bad when they do it, but our side isn't bad when we do it. This has to be universally condemned. Portraying women as victims of their own choices, portraying women as unquestionable when they make a victim narrative as a political weapon, those things have to stop.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I kind of wanted to bring up something before, but it was basically just like, it's kind of a shame that people will get insulted for paying for sex, even though they will also get insulted for being virgins, for being incels. So that's kind of a sad thing in itself. But another thing that I wanted to bring up was also, like, if I fully support the idea of prostitution as well. But I mean, like, I think that women who go into that, like, they have to be making those informed decisions. They have to be, is expressing themselves. They have to say, okay, this is what I want to do, and then they have to make that concrete, discussion with people, and then go ahead and do what they want to do, and accept that this is a choice that they made, that this is something that they are doing for money. It's the same with women who are, like, they're giving up sex to get powerful men to sleep with them, to get movie roles, to get whatever else they want to get the prestigious, the prestigious right of being able to sleep with the president who is already married. Like, whatever it is that these people are doing, these women are making that choice, and they need to stand by that choice, and they need to not, like, get all bent out of shape when people
on their shit, you mean?
yeah, like they need to accept the fact that they made a choice, and sometimes women can make bad choices just the same as everybody else. Believe it or not, we're human. I know that can be really hard for some people to accept, but like, that's part of the importance of, like, this whole concept of equality. In order for women to be, like, quote unquote equal to men in the ways that a lot of people are actually concerned about, women need to have equal rights and equal responsibilities. And pretending like women cannot do anything wrong, or that they can't make choices that they will eventually one day come to regret, it's taking away that level of responsibility, and therefore it's taking away the equality that they're claiming to want so badly.
Well, that's the thing. Let me wrap this all together into women being victims of their own choice. Why is that such a prevalent narrative? What is happening here? Well, as I just recently got The Manipulated Man by Esther Vilar, she has a new foreword since this was printed in 2008. And there's an author introduction that seems to be, updated with the times, because she talks about, despite all I wrote, I could not really imagine the power I was up against. It seemed that the only one allowed to criticize women on the quiet. Basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the point is that she did not even realize how bad it could get when she first wrote this book. And as she mentions in the introduction here, women make most decisions in a lot of everything. As she says, as women often have, thanks to our relatively stress-free free life, a higher life expectancy than men, and consequently make up the majority of voters in Western industrial nations, no politician could afford to offend us. And the media is not interested in discussing the issues involved either. Their products are financed through the advertising of consumer goods, and should we women decide to stop reading a certain newspaper or magazine as its editorial policy displeases us, then the advertisements targeted at us will also disappear. After all, it is well established that women make the majority of purchasing decisions. So what we're talking about here is the fact that women being held accountable for their choices will mean that they have to reevaluate their purchasing. They have to reevaluate the impulse buys. They have to reevaluate and hold themselves accountable for the trickery and the machinations and the manipulation of the advertising industry that has suckered them into, or Instagram or YouTube or whoever influencer they're watching has suckered them into buying yet another as seen on TV trash product. And then they will have to actually look at themselves and their decisions and then be more male-like. And we do know that men actually buy large, sparse purchases while women buy many small knick-knack trash purchases. So there is a difference in how men and women purchase things, and there's a difference in how much thought goes into purchasing them. And I feel like if women were held accountable for their decisions, that's one of the reasons why they're not. That's one of the reasons why the mainstream media and everything that we see and is presented to us is bankrolled. Who is bankrolling it? The same people that are making money off of selling us things. So it's all tied together. And we, of course, know that Ms. Magazine was sponsored by the CIA to begin with, and there's a lot of, I believe, psyops. I think the American people are one of the most propagandized people in the world based on their own mainstream media and the advertisements and the narratives that CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of them, that the narrative that is bankrolled by someone. Who is that someone? The same people that are selling us stuff. So if selling women stuff, because women are buying things. So if we introduce the dangerous idea of owning your own shit and of not being a victim of your own decisions, but instead making better decisions, the whole fucking economy will collapse, because the whole economy is based on female, spontaneous, mindless purchases. So we do have women victims of their own choices. Back to our conversation about miners and underwater welders. Yeah, most of them are guys because no women are doing those jobs. Where are those women? Oh, fucking at home being taken care of. But oh, I'm sorry, that also means they're victims because they're being kept out of the workforce and in the house. And they're victims of the luxury of not having to underwater fucking weld.
Well, and they're at home buying things off of television with the money that their husbands are making
home shopping network
jobs. Oh my God. Every so often somebody that I'm taking care of, will flip to one of those channels and stay on one of those channels for several minutes, and I'm like, oh God, make it stop. Especially the ones where they sell jewelry. I absolutely hate watching those because it's
talk about useless. I mean, those aren't even precious stones a lot of times, and they're nothing. You can't, there's no weight in gold and silver to our money anymore. You can't even exchange them at an equal rate. They're worthless trinkets, literally worthless
trinkets, exactly. But if they were precious gems, then you know that there is blood on them. So even the lower value ones,
some men and boys are fucking dying for those gems.
Yep. And if they're not dying to get them out of the ground, they're dying to keep them safe on the way to the market. So there's that. But yeah, women are totally the victims there, right? I'm gonna get into the super chats, and then I also wanna revisit feminist attacks on hero stories, because it blows my mind how offended they are at the idea that even though they expect men to protect women, when there are stories about men protecting women and rising to greatness during that journey of protecting the women in their lives or avenging the women in their lives, somehow that's glorifying men at women's expense, right? We don't want to actually have stories to encourage them to do that. But before we get into that, we have 4 or 5 super chats here. Albert Nada gave us $5 Canadian and said, my next video will be about double standards in the media regarding male versus female victimhood. I think that'll be an interesting one. The Spencer gave us $2 and said, Ford got $700,000 on GoFundMe for, quote, security. So we now know, different victim narratives are worth different amounts of money. What did Sarkeesian get, in the long run? Yeah, she got $250,000.
400,000 something.
Yeah, almost $500,000 for being victims of people's being a victim of people's words on the internet, right? Nobody ever actually did anything directly to her. She never accused anybody of coming to her house. She never accused anybody of approaching her personally.
To University of Utah, which then the FBI task force decided wasn't real.
Yeah,
that happened.
Yeah. So that's the most that she had was people's words. She was a victim of words, and she got $500,000. So if you can say that 36 years ago, you have this story of, you know, actual physical victimhood, but you can't say exactly when it happened or where, or give it a whole lot of other details about it, except for this one guy did it and you had one beer. That's worth $700,000. Your victimhood there is worth, if you're female, right? And if you do it at the right time against the right people. Curtis Wade gave us $5 and said, memory is callable. If you combine uncertain memories of 30 years ago with the rape hysteria of #MeToo, you get false allegations that may feel real. So I've brought this up before. I had 2 really traumatic near-death experiences before kindergarten. One of them happened when I was 18 months old, and that was an asthma attack, and it was just an asthma attack. It wasn't, there wasn't an anaphylactic response to allergies or anything like that. I was just, my allergies hit me that hard, and I had an asthma attack. The other one, I'm one of those fun people that's really, really allergic to penicillin, and I had a penicillin shot, and it almost killed me. I am so allergic to penicillin that when my kid was little, I could not be the one to give the dose if any of the kids had to take penicillin and it was liquid, because if it touched my skin, I would get blisters. It was that bad, right? So, and I had to have a needle to the chest. That was a hell of an experience that they portray on television as a lot different than it really is, or at least it's very different from for a 4-year-old. But I conflated those 2 memories together for years, and I remembered things that happened during the anaphylactic shock as if they happened during the first asthma attack. Like the doctor during the anaphylactic shock was using different things to try to get it under control, because he didn't want to dose a 4-year-old with the heavy drugs they usually use to deal with anaphylactic shock. And he thought he was going to have to do a tracheotomy, but he said trach. But when in my little 4-year-old oxygen-deprived mind, I thought he said he was going to do a trick. So I was like all excited because I was going to get to see a trick. But I swear, I remember 100% remember that happening during the first asthma attack. It does not make sense to me that it happened during the anaphylactic shock, but my mother says, nope, that was the second thing. So I'm 100% sure that it wasn't, and in my memory. But I'm also 100% sure that my mother would remember better than I did, because she was an adult when both of them happened.
That's the trick too, that actually categorizes some mental illnesses versus not having them, where you can disbelieve yourself, even though you have this really strong emotional, like, I know it happened, but then being able to step outside yourself and look at objective facts that contradict it. And even though you still have that feeling, it's still strong and it's still there, but you choose to put it aside and then just construct your narrative of your life or history or the past as it actually happened according to the most objective evidence you can find.
Right.
That is a special thing that I feel like is more on the less feminine side of the spectrum. While of course we've talked about this multiple times, but there's the OCD to schizophrenia spectrum, and then in mental illness and in general for all people, because it has to do with the left-right hemisphere interactions. And then I believe masculinity and femininity also fall in the same spectrum, with OCD being more the masculine and schizophrenia type being more feminine. And of course they have their benefits and drawbacks, but that is one of the failings, I believe, in the general sort of a feminine model, is this, and I struggle with this myself as well. I speak, anytime I condemn things that I also personally experienced, I'm also reminding myself these things. And I am not coming down on anyone in particular, because I struggled with this as well, but it's just a really, really useful life trick to not be, just falling apart and dragging the world down with you is if you are able to step outside of your emotions and your understanding of things that you're super, super strongly emotionally tied to, and you have no idea why. You have to be able to step outside of that and look at objective reality from multiple sources, from logically reconstructing the events, listen to what you are saying as if someone you dislike is saying it, because then you're going to start seeing all the logic flaws in it. Because when you hear yourself rationalize, it's kind of like you can't really see your own typos when you're rereading it, because your brain is attuned to what you want.
I have that problem.
Right, and that happens for emotions too. And so, one of the tricks I learned is listening to my own words as if they're coming from someone I dislike, from some feminist. And then
sorry.
So and that really helps, because you're like, oh man, there's somebody here. But yeah, our brains are fallible in general, and of course, in terms of memory specifically, Elizabeth Loftus has done such great work on memory and eyewitness and things like that. There's just a wealth of work that has recently been under attack because of this whole Blasey Ford situation. And one of the things that I found in my research from the previous show that you mentioned, Hannah, where we discussed this, one of the things I found is that memory is not only fallible and callable. I'm not sure what that means, but sure, let's go with that. But
I think maybe it was a typo.
But I do like that word, callable, because what happens is every time you recall your memory, you remember that the next time you recall the memory. So as you're retelling a story over many years, inconsistencies and misremembrances and things like that will slip in. And as you're recounting it, you will not remember the original. It's like a game of telephone in your own head. You will remember the previous distorted version. And obviously, the further and more times it gets recalled over a longer period of time, the more distorted it gets.
The fish gets bigger every time you tell the story.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's called something like the light bulb or halo effect or something like that. It's just the way, like, because the memory is brightest after you just have it, but then gradually over time, like a light bulb, the halo of the remaining light fades gradually until there's nothing left of the original memory except these reconstructed memories based off of the retellings that we've had.
Right, and trauma can actually also distort your memory. Different ways too, like, and this is another personal experience. When I was 12, I got bit by a mosquito that grew in stagnant water somewhere in the house, and it made me really sick. I almost died. That's like, I always tell you guys, that's my hobby. Not dying is my hobby. I do it regularly. But in order to do that, I have to almost die, right? So so I got encephalitis, and I had a fever. My mother measured my fever with a home thermometer at 107.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, extreme. They took me to the ER.
I hope so.
Yeah, that was like, fever, it gets up over 103 at that age. You go to the ER, especially in the condition I was in growing up. So, and I had a spinal tap and all this other stuff. But there are memories that I have from that experience that are extremely distorted. Like, the nurse that was wheeling the gurney I was on into the room where I had the spinal tap had this voice. Now, to understand, encephalitis is painful. It's brain swelling, and inside your skull there are pain sensors that when you have brain swelling, it's like the worst pain I've ever had in my life. And I've been shocked by electricity arcing from a power line. I have put my foot in hot coals and gotten third-degree burns. I've had road rash from not a motorcycle but a bicycle. I've put nails through my feet because I wasn't watching where I was walking, and I was real brilliant and put my foot in Epsom salts after that. Nothing. I've been through childbirth. I've had a C-section. Nothing compares to encephalitis, to the pain of encephalitis, right? So I don't feel headaches when I get them now, like, unless they're really bad. And this woman's voice, Jesus Christ, the way I remember it, you know the movie Not Waiting. Oh shit, the other one that came out that same year, Office Space. Not the same year, but the same time period that was about work. The Case of the Mondays woman from Office Space. and how her voice was all chirpy and perky.
This is Susie from
and
HR speaking.
Yes. Oh my God.
Oh,
This
no.
nurse, this nurse made that woman's voice sound depressing and sad and deep and quiet and soft, right? This woman was it was like somebody was taking a power drill and turning it on every time she talked, like right in my ear. And my mother said, well, her voice wasn't that high and it wasn't that loud and the lights in the hallway weren't as bright as you're remembering. Well, what do you do? And you're in a lot of pain, and every stimulus that comes in is stimulating the place that the pain is in. It amplifies everything and emphasizes everything and makes it seem like it's 10 times worse than it really is. And I think
that's
sometimes
true for emotional. Yeah. I just really quick. I remembered something. I'd like to look it up again though. But the basically the only kind of memory that is actually actively strengthened through trauma and stress is when you're remembering like words, very specific like facts, and then you get your ass beat.
Yeah.
So child abuse, homeschooling, or spanking kids if they didn't learn their lesson. That actually may have some biological reasoning for it, because you do encode the specific memories of facts better if you've also undergone physical pain.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'll have to double check. But of course, we do have strengthened stress-related memories, emotions, and then what do you remember, as you were saying, an exaggeration.
Right, and that may be when you see these women recalling instances where they felt victimized 30 years ago, and they were traumatized by it. I was essentially falsely accused of causing a car accident 10 years ago. And the memories of that, like if I go through and relive in my head the experience, tell myself again the story of what happened that day, I get enraged. It hurts all over again. I feel betrayed by the cop that saw people lying and the lies were obvious, and it was obvious the cop knew that they were lying, but I was the out-of-towner, and it was easier to just, write me up for it anyway. I feel betrayed over again. It all comes, and this was like a minor incident, right? It's not even a big thing in my life. Like I'm not damaged by it. I paid a fine, and it wasn't even a big fine, So, but the experience itself, there was it's not trauma so much as a distinct, significant shift in emotions around it, right? These women who feel victimized like 30 years ago, that they feel they were treated unfairly, or that something was taken from them, or they were forced into something that they didn't want to do. They may be looking at incidents that they actively participated in, that they could have made different decisions, like I could have spoken differently in that situation. And I may have, part of the reason the cop may have sided with the other side was because I was very hot under the collar at that time, and I wasn't very articulate because of that. And there may be women who are looking back at their experiences with men that they chose to have sex with because they didn't enforce their boundaries, and at those times they may have felt emotionally
or he didn't call them the next, or he didn't call them the next day.
Yeah, he didn't.
Something went wrong, and they felt betrayed and emotionally hurt because they had a thing going, and then suddenly he just fucked and left. Like, I would be upset about that if we had a particular understanding going with a person beforehand.
Or they thought there was an understanding, but there wasn't.
Yep, communication. There's that thing again.
Yeah, because I've made that mistake where I thought I had something going with a guy and I didn't. And it's very hurtful to figure out that you had assumed wrongly. And it does make an ass of you. And it's embarrassing and humiliating. And, you find out, hey,
it
that
hurts,
was really...
and it's easier to blame him.
Right. Nobody wants to feel stupid, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, and it takes a lot of work to say, you know what,
especially
that
women.
was my fault. I didn't communicate.
But we do put such women, the way we're still instinctual in ways, like, we have the toxic masculinity, and we have, which is like, if it does exist, at times when it does, it is a man being overly aggressive, overly stubborn, overly narrow-minded, overly autistic. Fine, that happens, sure. But then and a lot of times it's encouraged by women because they want an aggressive ogre as a mate. On the other hand, we have toxic femininity, which is the instinctual side of femininity, and that is a super concern over social interactions and social hierarchy. If you look at any kind of primate, if you look at women and relationships in families, currently it is a matrilineal situation. You have the grandmother, you have the mother, you always pay your deference to the mother, to the grandmother, to the wife, to the sister. It is a very primate still like organization where the men, as soon as they reach of age, they leave, and the females all stay together and they welcome new men into their tribe, just like monkeys. So the social hierarchy and battling, like the Kardashians, they're the top clan right now, right? And there's some other clan of women, I'm sure, that is, or they maybe upstaged the Hiltons or whoever before them was some high-ranking female clan. Women are instinctually minded to look for social climbing and social hierarchy machinations and concern. Therefore, it is extremely emotionally wounding to feel embarrassed or in some way out of the group, out of the loop. That's why FOMO, fear of missing out, exists for women so strongly. And as the more we become feminized as society, the more we all adapt these ideas. And that's actually what happened with our, I don't even blame capitalism for that at all. It has to do with introducing women to the workforce, where the jobs, office jobs, became social climbing ladders because of introducing the female type of being into it. We, at a certain point in 69 actually is when it all fell apart. But after the 60s, we started seeing the dynamic switch. Before that, we had an idea of those who invent will get money and fame, and they will proceed to great lengths and heights. Like, the inventors that were credited with inventions that they may not have made, but, like Bell and Morgan, not JP Morgan, the other one, Edison, and people like that. So we have this idea before the 50s and 60s that, during the 50s too, that if you put in the work, if you are really good at your job, your boss will notice you, you will get a promotion, the standard idea of how to get ahead. That has been demolished since the early 70s. And since then, since the 80s especially, we've had this social climbing, the glass ceiling, the concrete ceiling, the whatever grass floor, all these ideas of top and bottom and middle management that, you can try to climb out of that. And if you are in middle management, then of course all the shit rolls down on you. And there's these social machinations to work in office and to work in other places where their efficacy and their merit and their ability to produce should be valued. But instead of valuing the people, the actual programmers, for instance, who created Microsoft to begin with, the people who actually, great example, Microsoft, because with each new iteration, each new upgrade, it becomes worse and worse and worse. Well, because what happens is people who originally created it got cleaned out, got fired, didn't get paid enough to continue, and people who were managing them, they got all the money, but they're not the ones with the ideas. So we have a complete flip and switch in what is considered valuable and what will continue and give to your career growth since women entered the workforce en masse, because women have a mentality instinctually to be concerned about their social status. And so things that specifically have to do with the relationships, which of course, what we're talking about, men and women, sex, the most intimate, the most prized of all possessions, because it is the number one currency in female primates. If you give that currency to someone and they didn't pay you back fairly in whatever way you imagined, that's a no-no. That's a big no-no. You're going to be really upset about that. And you're also going to be upset about anyone else finding out that you were shortchanged, because your value entirely depends on your place in the social hierarchy. And your place in the social hierarchy actually does depend on how frivolously or how much you hold back the sex that you give, because it helps you advance. So it's this very complicated interaction that can be boiled down to just basic social instincts that female have stronger. So yeah, being embarrassed, feeling stupid, it's especially bad for really feminine women. More masculine women may not care so much, but feminine women who have a big circle of friends that are also women who support women, those kinds of girls, it is particularly emotionally painful. And of course, we know emotional pain exhibits itself as physical pain. So, and of course, if you've never experienced strong physical pain or difficulty like men may have through abuse or through jobs or through whatever, your bar for what hurts is set way lower than other people. And so being shortchanged or, somebody lying to you or betraying you is to them an actionable offense. That is why we had that in the polls, asking women, did a man lie to you after having sex with you, or lie to you before you had sex with him? And if he did, then he raped you.
No,
that's where that came from.
There were several questions that were worded like that, and that some of that, like what you were just talking about, really explains a lot about problems in the workplace. That, every place I've worked, we've had to have anti-harassment training, and part of the aspects of the anti-harassment training are this idea that how the individual feels about the interaction is more defining than the intent of the other individual in the interaction. And I think you nailed it right there. If we really want an effective means for women to be successful in the workplace, we have to change the way women work, and we have to change the way women bring sex as a currency and social interaction as a currency into the workplace. Because we do have that barrier,
or just in life in general.
In life in general, yeah.
Where slut-shaming comes
specifically in the workplace, women have to, if they want to have that success, they have to be able to separate themselves from sexuality when they're in the workplace. And at this point, and men have to be able to do it as well. At this point, we are not there. Both sexes are either sexualizing or getting phobic about the fact that the opposite sex has a sexual nature in the workplace, instead of saying, oh, hey, you know what, we're here to work. Work is the primary reason for the existence of this environment and should be the thing that we're interacting on, and we'll leave that other stuff at the door. So, yeah. But in any case, on to the next one. We have, let's see, we did Curtis Wade. That didn't sound right. We read Curtis Wade. Sorry, Curtis. We did that without your consent.
Harassment.
Yes. Okay, so the lawsuit will begin tomorrow. Censor Duke, not Censor Duck, but Censor Duke gave us $2 that starts with an A, and I don't know what that is. Maybe Australian, $2 Australian, and said, Orange Man bad. Crowdfather of the East gave us $5 and said BBC 3 released a clip on Facebook of 3 women calling men witches because of feminist claims and became Puritan like witch hunters. Charmed satire. It's been so long since I've actually watched Charmed. I remember it, but it's not. All my super chats just disappeared. What the fuck? It's not a thing that I could look at and say, is that a Charmed satire or not? It might be, but maybe they're more trying to. BBC is kind of feminist, kind of progressive, not left wing so much as, because there were the original progressives were actually on both sides. There were Republican progressives, and that I'm not going to get into that today, but I think it's more of a political statement than anything, and it's probably specifically related to current bullshit, if you know what I mean. So, but that said, I want to get on real quick before we run out of time on the show. I want to get on a little bit to. In the intro, I talked a bit about feminist objections to the hero story, and not necessarily just the hero's journey story, but hero stories where you have a male character who rescues female characters that are in danger or that have been attacked or assaulted or kidnapped or whatever, or takes revenge on an evil character or a malicious character that has hurt the women in his life. And these stories, from my experience, just reading novels and playing games and watching movies and enjoying, like I read more horror comics. I didn't get into the superhero comics so much, but all of that stuff the entire idea of the hero character was more of a portrayal of benevolent masculinity or positive masculinity, a portrayal of not just owning your shit, but taking responsibility. A problem comes along and you see that problem, and the first thought in mind is somebody's got to do something about this. The answer is, well, I'm somebody. And
right.
It seems like feminists in particular are very resentful when men are portrayed as the person who says, I'm somebody, I will take care of this, when the problem has impacted a woman.
You know, like that's something that actually really bothers me about a lot of things. Like not to like stray from the point or anything like that, but I find that men have so many wonderful positive behaviors that they like to engage in. Like this is one example where they will be often the first to jump in and want to help somebody. It's kind of the same thing with mansplaining, right? Like men are so fast to want to jump in and help. So like if they see somebody like struggling, or if they see somebody talking about a topic that they know about, they'll want to jump in and be like, hey, I know about that topic. Like what can I do to help? And feminists will often interpret that as men being condescending and negative and have this terrible tone to it that men usually don't intend at all. But they'll take these positive behaviors that men have, and then they'll just twist them into something negative and make it sound like this terrible thing. And I just don't understand it, because it belittles the many positive things that men have about them.
Now this is one of the things that really bugs me about feminists. Like they make these demands, right? Men are supposed to stand up for women. Men are supposed to protect women. Men are supposed to, everything that men do has to benefit women. Feminism, to be fair, feminism has never ever accomplished anything without going to men for help. There has never been a successful feminist initiative that did not 100% rely on male politicians, men in society making changes in the way they do things, men in various industries making changes in the way they do things, or being taxed, men being taxed to pay for the initiative. Feminism relies 100%, unequivocally relies on men for everything, right? But they don't want them to get any credit for it. And they definitely don't want any stories, any narratives out there that glorify men's helpful nature. They don't want any stories that glorify men's protective nature. They don't want any stories that glorify men's generous giving nature, where you talk about the fact that a man will interrupt his entire life to fix your problem, or to take care of your adversity that you're facing, and then he'll get back on with his life. And even if he deals with trauma and pain and suffering and fear and so on in that situation, in that journey of fixing your problem or dealing with what you have faced in your life, dealing with the adversity that has affected you, even if he's got changes to his character, changes to his psychological makeup because of that, he is still expected to come back from it and get on with his life as if nothing ever happened. Feminists do not like seeing that discussed. And this is something that I don't know how else to put it, but there is a value to these stories, right? From growing up with novels, and this is, with me, it was largely novels. There were video games that I played. There were a lot of video games that I played, but it was largely novels that I saw this from. I read a lot of Jack London, and I read a lot of horror novels. I read, and I also read like pioneer stuff. One of the ones that stands out is kind of funny is Little House on the Prairie, which was more of a little girl story. But all of these portrayed that that dealing with your own shit, that taking responsibility for, something comes along that needs dealt with, something comes along that needs change. There's a threat. There's a type of adversity that people are dealing with, and the hero character, the person who is responsible and who is the focus of the story, that person takes responsibility on themselves, whether it's their problem or not, for dealing with this issue. And the greatness that is portrayed in those stories for these heroes, that is beneficial to the reader, the viewer, the player, the gamer, the so on, the witness to the story, in that you learn lessons from that. You learn about the rewards of stepping up and dealing with shit, and you learn about the rewards for being not just accountable, but mindful of your surroundings, mindful of your situation, mindful of the people around you, and viewing everybody as valuable and human, and in not just in need of equal treatment from you, but also deserving of it.
Yeah. And like a lot of the games that people like Anita Sarkeesian like to claim as sexist or problematic in some way, like the ones where a damsel in distress was kidnapped or whatever. Those were often my favorite kinds of games growing up, because I don't know, something about the idea of having a loved one be taken from you, and it's not necessarily always a woman. Like I played games where like baby Luigi was kidnapped, or
right.
Mario was in trouble or something like that, and it's not necessarily about whether it's a man or a woman. It's just about, the idea of going and saving a loved one that is in trouble. There's just always something intriguing about that story to me. But these people will portray that as being, oh, look, this is just men benefiting from women being weak, and they want to get a power fantasy out of it. It's like, no, these are just time-honored stories that a lot of people are trying to appreciate, and they want to feel like they can help the loved ones that they care about. These are just things that everybody has.
That's the you put the nail hit the nail on the head there. It's about wanting to be needed or wanted or doing something for your loved ones. So on one hand, you have to have loved ones, people that you care for more than you care for yourself, because that to me is definition of love, where you will sacrifice personal whatever happiness, I guess is a good word. Personally, you will sacrifice personal happiness for the happiness of somebody else. That is the definition of love, and fight me on that. But so you truly know when you love someone is when you are willing to take a hit for them to be happy. And of course that can be abused and taken advantage of, obviously, but that's not the point. There's so many things that are beautiful and good that can be taken advantage of. That's not a very good counter argument to love. So to have love in the first place is to care for another. And a lot of times we find ourselves in a company of very histrionic, which also means one of the things there is a narcissistic, self-absorbed. And narcissism actually is dysfunctional self-focus. So you can completely hate yourself and still be a narcissist. That's one of the greatest misconceptions, is that narcissists aren't people who believe that they're amazing and the best, and the whole egotistical, arrogant idea. That is not what a narcissist is. Narcissist is self-obsessed to a fault. That can be obsessed with their issues, obsessed with their faults, obsessed with how they're unlovable, just self-focused all the time. Good or bad, doesn't really matter. And so when you're in a company of narcissists, it is categorical that they will not feel loved or have loved ones all that much. Nothing will really be enough, because as we've talked on Cherry Stem, for instance, on my channel before, and maybe even here, is that when you feel love for another person, when you express love, such as doing something for someone, making them a cup of tea, making them food, cleaning for them, taking care of them one way or another, in a volunteering kind of capacity, caring for children, caring for the elderly, caring for the homeless, that fact alone will make you feel like the world loves you more, because you are releasing oxytocin when you care for people. When you love others, you feel love, because it's the same molecule. So that the inverse is true as well. When you have people who are unable to feel love for others, they also do not feel loved, and they are a black hole of constantly needing more attention, more proof. Show me that, what have you done for me lately? Show me that you love me. Proof, like jump off a building, go to any millions of jobs that I require to make the standard of living that I require. Or the greatest one lately, will you risk going to prison to touch me? Do you want me physically so badly that you're willing to go to prison? And that's, I think, another issue of where the rape culture, all of that is all about. Part of it is this drive of wanting men to prove to them that they will do anything for them. And it's part of the same black hole. It's part of not loving, therefore not feeling loved. And so if you don't have loved ones, And if you have everything you could possibly want to the point where you are an unending black hole of more, that also means you don't feel needed. You don't care about feeling needed. You got everybody falling over themselves in one way or another to be with you, to support you as a normal woman, or as a feminist even woman. You have people trying their hardest to please you all the time. So you don't have loved ones, and you don't have a desire to be needed. You don't understand. You cannot empathize with that, which comes from not really getting everything, not getting social approval all the time, not having people love you. In my experience, people who have come out on the other side of neglect and abuse, they come out swinging, wanting to fucking help others. They come out wanting to be there for someone because nobody was there for them. The good ones, they become that which was always denied to them. So they want to be there for somebody. They want to help somebody. They want to rescue them because nobody fucking rescued them and they needed it. And so they understand, they know deeply the pain of that. And so they want to be the light that they want to see in the world. And of course, people who don't have those experiences can't empathize. They don't understand. To them, it is once again twisted into a narcissistic perception of, why are they trying to rescue me like I'm some sort of, weakling, like once again, social mindedness, concern about social hierarchy, self-obsession. This is categorical of feminism at this point. And people who buy into these ideas, they have a legitimate mental difficulty. They are suffering from their own narcissism and histrionics and their own inability to step outside the fantasy world of their fucked up emotions and the narrative that is built around them to sell them shit and continuously keep them unhappy and dissatisfied, because those are the people that buy things and to constantly go out and fuck with things and can't sit still and can't relax. And we have built a system currently that works off of that manic, toxic fucking energy.
And I've seen that in particular with, like I said, we have, this understanding in the rest of society of the value of the hero narrative, where we learn that people grow and change and build their character, and they forge themselves into greater things, greater people, through service to other people, through those journeys where they strive to protect, or they strive to provide or to help when somebody that they care about, somebody in their lives, or even a complete stranger. It's why we value firemen. It's why we value police officers. The old stereotype of the police officer before we had all of the corruption come out and everything that happens when you get into a position like that, and it becomes a position of authority instead of a position of service.
And also, we can't forget that a lot of cops in some areas work in extremely dangerous areas, it's really easy for them to feel anger towards people that are constantly putting them in danger. And I just want to say really fucking
not
quick,
to mention the paranoia that happens when you are essentially in a war zone, and there are neighborhoods in the United States that are war zones to cops and to the people that live there.
The greatest victory by the oligarchs in the New World Order or the Illuminati or whatever you want to fucking call them, that was their greatest victory, dividing cops and civilians. Cops is the only fucking hope we have.
Yeah.
If the government decides to come at us with their tanks and their drones and their fucking M16s and their fucking airplanes, cops and army, the individual people that work, they're the ones in there. They're the ones that are supposed to be on our side. They're our last defense. They're the ones that can put down their weapons to not go against civilians, and they're the ones that can join the civilians. And the fracturing of police from people through the Black Lives Matter and all of that has been fucking horrific for our future. I dread the day when that will come into play, if it ever does, because I believe that is the greatest defeat that we have suffered, is getting police off of the side of the civilians. We're supposed to be there for them, helping them, rooting out the bad guys, making them wear body cams, holding them to the highest standard of accountability, paying them more, and being on their fucking side because they are doing something terribly dangerous in a world that has just gone to shit because variety of reasons, feminism being one of them. The constant psyops that are leveled at people are maniacs in America currently, fucking maniacs in a variety of different ways. And the fact that we lost cops And we're probably going to lose soldiers too soon because of protesting the war, therefore becomes protesting the soldiers. And we cannot differentiate between the foot soldiers, the people that are doing the job, versus those who are sending them there. And we need cops on our side as civilians. And just the fact that that broke, it breaks my heart. Sorry.
Yeah, I was very sad to see the dialogue go the direction it did with Black Lives Matter. This was a conversation that did need to happen. You know, that there is dysfunction between civilians and cops, and it can be really bad. But unfortunately, with the dialogue taking an adversarial position rather than there is a dysfunction and we are all experiencing it and we need to work together to fix it. And it's impacting attitudes, and those attitudes need to be addressed and changed. We got cops are bad, or civilians are bad, and civilians of certain ethnic groups are bad, and there doesn't seem to be anything in between. And that's another one. I think that you know, when you talk about psyops, I think that the political narrative behind that really constitutes a psyop, and that is it's not necessarily specific to feminism, but it is
overall.
It's in the same. Yeah, it's in the same end. The regressive progressives that feminists are more associated with, the feminists on the left, basically. That is where that comes from, and that does need to stop. But with regards to the hero narrative, what I'm seeing with feminism, and you did hit the nail with a whole set of things that you said regarding that, is that feminists want men to be heroes, but they don't want them to get credit for it. They don't want to have to appreciate what's done for them. They don't want to have to treat their heroes, who are servants. Hero is, somebody in the chat said it, and I've lost the comment, but I think it was Tyler Preston. Hero and servant in a lot of ways do mean the same thing. Hero can be another word for servant, because a hero is somebody who does act in service to others. And feminists don't want to acknowledge the service. They don't want to acknowledge it as a thing that is respectable and that deserves gratitude and that deserves to be viewed as a positive choice by the individual. It's just owed. It's a debt that they've come to collect, that the hero owes to women in general and feminists in particular. And if they don't pay it silently and walk away, or get out of the way, not expecting even so much as a, hey, that was very nice of you and I appreciate it, not even expecting that. If they don't do that, then they're entitled and they hate women, you know, and that really grinds my gears. And seeing that, and that's one of the reasons why they hate hero narratives in stories, I think, because the hero narrative in a story gives a very stark, very open, in-your-face kind of demonstration that the things that make an individual a hero are positive characteristics, that they are admirable, and that the hero deserves admiration and appreciation for exhibiting those characteristics. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with the victim. It doesn't necessarily mean the victim is weak or stupid or foolish or deserves disdain.
No. When you give deference and respect to a person, that means you're below them. Yeah. You gotta think in monkey hierarchy terms.
They really don't seem to get that it's
being
an act
thankful
of love
means you
towards
owe
the
them.
victim. Yeah.
That's bad.
And that just blows my mind. You know, and then they expect it in real life. In real life, they want you to pay those extra taxes to cover their birth control. They want you to fund initiatives to get more women than men into the education system. It's only okay, it's only equal if there's 60% or more women. They want you to give up your job that you're qualified for, that you're doing well, so that a woman can step in and fuck it up if she's not properly trained, if she didn't belong there, and so on. A woman who didn't get there because she earned it. A woman who didn't get there because in competition with you she demonstrated herself to be the more qualified candidate for your job. No, they want tokenism. And
which, I mean, at this point, the qualifications for a job, we're dropping those too after a certain point. There's only at the entry level, at the base level where all the workers are, that's the only place you have to show merit. A lot of times the way we've structured our office jobs is that it's not even merit. The only merit that exists is who can kiss up to the hiring or the boss or whoever better. It's just all such a shit show at this point.
Well, there's a rare known rule.
Drop the equality thing.
Yeah, there's a rare, well-known rule in corporate hierarchies that an individual will, after they've risen through the ranks to the highest point they're going to get, when they get to that point, they will be one level higher than their competency. And it's partly due to people's ambition, and it is partly due to the fact that when you do a good job at what you're doing, when you get the attention of the people above you, when you schmooze properly. I suck at schmoozing. I will say that right now. But when you schmooze right,
women for the win.
Yeah, you get you get the next position up. Norman P. Chesterton. I can't pronounce your name. That's too simple of a name to not be able to pronounce. Norman P. Chesterton says Peter's Law, and I think that's correct. I think I remember hearing it that way. But the idea is that you keep going until you get to the point where you are, you're barely keeping your head above water, and you stay there.
It's like a metaphor for humanity.
Yeah,
I feel like the whole reach exceeding the grasp. You know,
yes. Nobody
really
ever. Yeah, nobody ever wants to admit they can't handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we can't handle it.
Right? Nobody ever wants to admit that I said your name, Norman. Nobody ever wants to admit that they can't handle something. So, like, if I say it 3 times, will you come through the mirror? But yeah, and that is like, you combine that problem, that competency issue, and the feminist failure to understand heroism, that it is an area of service. The feminist failure to be able to empathize with, I want to take care of people because I love them. You know, that aspect of humanity, especially that aspect. Like, you watch any news coverage of any natural disaster, right? Floods, earthquakes, fires. Who is in there fixing shit? Who is in there taking care of getting people out safely, making sure there are supplies, making sure those supplies get to people even when it's dangerous, making sure that if the disaster is something that, like a fire that has to be stopped by human intervention, that there is human intervention taking place, making sure that shit gets done. It is almost entirely always men. When women get involved, they're usually working inside of a building where they have, you know, a bunch of supplies that they have to sort and hand out to people that are in that shelter because they have already been rescued by the men. When you see people going out with boats in a flood to get into people's houses where the water's halfway up the first story and they have to climb in, you know, through the second story to get people out, it's men. You know, and
right.
This is to talk about traits that are toxic and dysfunctional and gender them as masculine traits. Feminists are quite happy to do that. They are quite happy to use the phrase toxic masculinity to describe things that both sexes do, like homophobia or engaging in violence, or lying, being deceitful. Not caring about other people. Both sexes make those mistakes in their lives. Both sexes do those things maliciously in their lives. But when you talk about taking personal risk in service to other people, like outright physical personal risk, and pushing your body, the performance of your strength and your dexterity, and your endurance in service to other people, that is almost always men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we really need to stop understating that, because I think that too often it's become very popular to denigrate men and talk down about men and insult men for everything that they supposedly do. But I think that a lot of people have forgotten about appreciating men for all that they do, because they do a lot. And we really, really need to give them that kind of support. I think if we actually do that genuinely, I think that that's going to go a long way towards the reducing the increasing suicide rates of men in our society right now.
Exactly. You know, and that's one of the reasons why the hero narrative is so vital in our storytelling and in our interaction with people who actually live the hero narrative in real life as a non-narrative, as an action, is that we need men to have that instinct. You know, we need there to be physical strength behind that instinct and physical strength displayed in that instinct. Imagine how fucked our society would be if we lived in a world where the disasters that we face, that we, you know, you can't prevent tidal waves, you can't prevent earthquakes, we don't know how to prevent hurricanes right now, we don't have terraforming, we can't prevent lightning from starting forest fires. All of these things are going to happen. There will be tornadoes whether we want them to happen or not. If we did not have heroism as part of masculine nature, because we aren't going to have it as part of feminine nature from the women of today. Maybe the women of history. Maybe there were women in history that were much better than the women of today, right, at that. But if we did not have the physical drive that men demonstrate to go out and help when something terrible happens that affects a large number of people, we'd be fucked. We would have mass death. We would have mass destruction and no recovery. Who rebuilds after a hurricane? Who rebuilds after a flood? Who rebuilds after a massive fire? It's men. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have rebuilding. We wouldn't have rescue. We wouldn't have any of the things that we have that allow our society to weather those tough times and come back from them. Every time we had a series of disasters like we've had in the last couple of years, it would wipe out our civilization.
Yeah, like, I mean, as much as I obviously I never would want something like this to happen, but like, I really strongly suspect that if we had another war, like a really significant war, I think that a lot of this sort of talk would go away really quickly. Yeah. Because people would all of a sudden realize just how important and significant men are to our society. I think that it's a real shame that people have forgotten what men can do. And I think that it's a shame that it might take something like that for some people to understand and really appreciate it. And I really hope that that sort of thing never comes to pass. But, you know,
I do as well. But that, to me, that's why these hero narratives are important. Not just because, you know, we need to encourage men to continue to engage in this risky behavior that really is for our benefit, but because we need to remind everybody else, women, children, people, older people, to continue to value the hero. That we don't just treat the hero as a servant. Because the hero is, you know, doing what they do in service to us, but they're not just a servant. They're somebody who did you a hell of a favor. And yeah, gratitude is a debt. You owe them for it. They may not ask for it. They may come back and say, "Oh, shucks, you know, don't make a big deal out of it." But the fact is, if you treat the hero with disdain over and over and over again, you lose the hero. And if you lose the hero, you're screwed. So what feminists are attacking when they attack the hero narrative and when they attack the damsel tropes and stories, while they're simultaneously relying on that damsel trope for every aspect of their dogma, they're attacking civilization itself. They are attacking humanity itself. They are attacking human nature. They are attacking what makes human civilization successful. And that's where we are. So I'm going to read off the last few super chats, and then if my co-hosts have some last things to point out, after that we will, and then we'll be ready to end the show. Let's see, I was at Exploding Prinny gave us $5 and said, The Princels and the Pigtails, I don't exactly know what those are. The Princels and the Pigtails are fighting again. I told them that we're all victims of the same cruel matriarchy, but they won't listen to me, dude. So just a real, I don't know, Princels, that's a new, I've heard people call MGTOWs that have basically gone completely, utterly, irrevocably black pill as Pigtails. To be fair, every political outlook and every movement that is a response to existing circumstances is going to have its most cynical and most pained end. And I find it difficult to label anybody. I don't even think I would label the Black Lives Matter proponents pigs for what they do. Their attitudes are dysfunctional and misguided, and I think the people that get called Princels and Pigtails may have the same problem. Their attitudes are dysfunctional and misguided. And in all of those cases, there's a reason they've ended up in that situation where their attitudes are dysfunctional and misguided. And the best way to address the dysfunctional nature has to start with understanding why it ended up that way. Well, with men's issues, the reason it ended up that way is because of the legal situation that allows women who have no ethical meter, basically, to completely and utterly destroy a man with impunity, no less. Like, they might get judged by the people around them, but they're not going to face any repercussions legally. They're not going to lose their jobs. They're not going to be treated differently. They can't, because they'll just go after the next person. And I can understand people getting very resentful over that. And when they see women taking advantage of it, and they don't see a similar situation that men are able to take advantage of, I can see them seeing that as a female characteristic rather than a function of how the law enables the dysfunctional among women. And I honestly think the only way to solve that is to change what the law allows. And I would not get too wrapped up in people who sort of go off the deep end and start blaming everybody of one sex for the behavior of some of the people of one sex. As they're not in power. They're not like where feminists can go through and say, well, everybody that's male is guilty of rape, and therefore we need laws that affect due process, and they get it. I don't think MGTOWs are anytime soon going to get the laws changed to, like, for instance, take away women's votes. They could scream about that for their entire lives, you know, from the tops of buildings and everything, and nobody will listen. I think that's part of the reason they're upset. So they're not the threat, and let them be angry and let them express it. We got bigger problems to deal with, honestly.
Yep.
You know, now I'm not saying to agree with them necessarily, or ignore the dysfunction inherent in those generalizations. You don't have to adopt it, but like I said, they're not really a threat. Xeranx gave us $5 and said, Eddie Murphy, Coming to America. I'm not singing because I can't remember the tune, but to be loved, what a feeling. And somebody asked what the black pill is. Black pill is basically giving up hope. Black pill is we are doomed. The short version of the black pill is we are doomed. So there you go. Everything is awful. That's the black pill.
I'm not a big fan of that mentality, honestly. It doesn't get anything done. I can understand people who have tried for a long time and had no successes falling into that line of thinking, but in terms of getting things done, I don't think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and I will agree with that. But I also understand that with some people it's going to happen because they've just been through a lot of shit. And, you know, you cannot force everybody to be an activist. And it's okay.
Oh, for sure.
But any last thoughts on the topic, you guys?
I think we've talked it all out. At least I have.
I think we covered like 3 different topics.
Yep,
Yeah.
we did. We covered 3 different, kind of closely related topics. So with that, then, I just want to remind everybody, like and share. The stream itself will, after the stream is done, it will not be saved as a permanent stream on the Honey Badger radio channel, only on the Honey Badger live streams channel. So be sure to like and share on the Honey Badger live streams channel so that people will be able to continue to see the stream. And with that...
Oh, wait.
Yes.
Sorry. I just wanted to throw my hat in the ring.
Yes,
in
shill.
A sense that, let me shill, because all the super chats and all that wonderful stuff is amazing, and please, guys, continue sending them. And I love that you want me to be on the show and you're talking to me through them. But once again, all of it goes to the Honey Badger Radio and to the people that are working really hard behind the scenes to bring you the shows, and it goes to their salaries, and all of it goes to the Honey Badger Radio. So if you'd like to make sure I have more time to take off for shows like this, and if you like hearing my voice on this station broadcast and you like my perspective, please consider becoming my patron on patreon.com/AnnaCherry. And there's a lot of crossover between things that we do here on the Honey Badger and the stuff that I do personally on my channel and in my endeavors. So give it a like, follow it, check out Cherry Stem, become a supporter if you can without hardship. And once again, thank you very much for supporting this channel and the Honey Badgers and helping us thrive and survive and bring the fight to the masses, speak our truth to power. You guys enable that, and you kick ass, and that's it.
And be sure to follow the links in the low bar to both my co-hosts have channels, and then also Cherry Stem. What day is Cherry Stem? What day and time?
It is every first Sunday of the month, but we started a new format where we're going to try to do it every Sunday. So currently it is set to Sundays. We're aiming probably around noon. For now, twice a month, eventually every week, and it's going to be more of like a digest of recent news and kind of a deep dive on a particular topic that comes from it. But mostly you guys are going to get sort of a news STEM format, and that's on Sundays on my channel.
All right, and Prim, you're on every week as well, aren't you?
Well, I mean, I am on every week here. I try and get a video out about once a month. My own channel. It's been tough with school, but yeah, I do try and produce content as much as possible. If I am taking a turn on the shill wheel, it would not be for myself. It would actually be for Canadian Association for Equality. They're actually attempting to open a center for men and families in Calgary now. And as many of you know, they have actually already opened a center for men and families in, I can't remember if it's Ottawa or Ontario, but I know it's like one of those places. They have opened it there, and it is a place where men can go and find support. And this is something that I'm doing research on, like in my own studies, right? Like I'm trying to suggest that we need more support for men in our communities. We need more areas that male victims of domestic violence or men who have struggled with parental alienation, things like that, can go to. So this is something that's really important, actually. If we could get a center dedicated to men's needs in the area of Calgary, like that would be fantastic, because that is a large center, and there are a lot of people that call into the crisis center that I deal with that don't have anywhere to go. So we're definitely working to try and get that center open. And on that one, it's patreon.com/menandfamilies. And basically what's going on there is every donation is actually going to be matched. There's one donor who's going to be matching all the donations, and then there's going to be another one who may or may not be matching. It's a little complicated, but they explain it better on the Patreon page. But yeah, so that's a really, really great initiative that I'm part of, that I'm really striving for all the men in our community. It would be really amazing to have that open. So yeah, definitely consider that.
I also know that I think it's Cafe is also hosting Lauren Farrell at the University of Toronto. This is 6 years, actually 6 years apparently to the day later. He's returning to the after the the whole protest incident. He's returning to the University of Toronto to deliver a presentation on his new book, The Boy Crisis. It's going to be the same venue. This got Cafe on the path that sort of got them started opening men's centers in the first place, and they're hoping to generate some high interest in actually coming to see Dr. Farrell speak, and also in supporting those centers. The details of the event are at eventbrite.com, and it's actually it looks like it's going to be the tickets range from $15 to $60 Canadian. I imagine it has to do with the seating and so on. And the event is Friday, November 16th at 7 p.m. and it lasts until 9 p.m. And I'll be bringing this up again, but I wanted to alert people ahead of time, because the more ticket sales ahead of time, the more secure the event's basically going to be. In they can't cancel this without pissing off a lot of people. And I know that Dr. Farrell's speeches, his discussions and everything, have been under attack by feminism and by feminists, and particularly feminist academics, since he fell out of favor for pointing out that women have actually made progress. That was a sin. You can't say that women have made progress. Yeah, my pronunciation is silly, and it sounds like I'm calling him wild. I am noticing you, Norman. So with that, once again, I will thank everyone for listening. Thank both of my co-hosts, both of you, for taking the time to be on the show. I apologize profusely for the timing confusion. This is the new showtime. Hopefully, we'll get it settled and everything. But since I'm going to have to move, and it's going to involve, change in driving time to my night job, this is it. I am noticing you, Norman. And with that, good night, everybody.